Hi everyone. So today in this video we're going to be looking at how I've implemented or how I've designed the way I've implemented things like Steam achievements and Steam leaderboards in one of my games. So this is some kind of problem. A lot of you will end up wanting to implement something like this in a game, something like leaderboards, achievements, things like that. And these things can get really complicated really quickly, and you can end up, if you think about something like the achievements, you're going to want to like unlock an achievement in all sorts of places in your code. And if you're not careful, you can get lots of awful couplings going on. And so there's a pattern we use called the Service Locator pattern, which is what I've used here. And also, what I've tried to do in the way I've implemented this is make it so that the code doesn't need to know what kind of API it's connecting to. So it doesn't need to know if it's connected to the Steam API. Maybe it could connect to the PlayStation API, maybe the Nintendo one. But your game code is decoupled, so it doesn't care. It just says, right, unlock an achievement. And then the service locator finds an achievement service and unlocks an achievement. It doesn't need to know that it's connected to Steam or Nintendo or PlayStation or whatever. And even better, if it's connected to nothing, it still works, because maybe you want to put your game on itch. You don't necessarily want it to always have to be connected to Steam. So it's one of these things that's probably easier if we just jump into the code. Unlike some of the other videos I've done, I thought the best way to explain this would be to actually look at a game, a live game that we've got running on Steam, Making a Home, which is, like, as of this recording, we're like launching next week. But maybe, I don't know, it might have been launched already if you're viewing this from the future. So I want to start by looking at how I've implemented achievements, so Steam achievements specifically. And it's one of these things where there's all sorts of like connected bits and pieces to this problem, so it's hard to know where to start. Probably the first place to start actually is with how I've implemented Steamworks. So if you're going to put a game on Steam, you need to use the Steam API, and that's written in C++. If you're using Unity, you need some kind of C# wrapper. And I'm using Facepunch. So Facepunch have published like a Steam API for Unity, and it works really well. I'd recommend using that. And so this class, so I've made this one class called Steamworks Controller, where its entire responsibility is just to get a connection to Steam. And that's all it does. And we don't really need to talk to this class much other than it kind of starts itself, and you can see what's happening here. I've set this up as a singleton, but I don't ever use the fact that it's a singleton. So if you're unfamiliar with the way singletons in Unity work, I've set a public static of type, the same type as this class, and when it's created, I put a reference to this instantiated class into this instance. There are lots of pros and cons about using singletons. Like I said, in this case, I don't actually use the reason that you would do this instance thing, so you can get access to this class from outside anywhere in your code, which actually can be the cause of problems, because suddenly you have global access to something, and that can be dangerous. You end up introducing couplings, and you don't necessarily want to. So yeah, but I don't actually use it. Like because I use a service locator pattern, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And so this is the standard kind of Unity singleton. I'll let you have a look. If you're not sure on it, do a Google, or I can do a video, just ask. So all this does is it connects to Steam. And it also does a thing where it sets it so that this object doesn't get destroyed. So our goal is to have one single game object in our scene that does everything to do with connecting to the Steam API. So it does all the achievements, all the like stats, all the leaderboard stuff, and those things. So we've got it in that one nice place. We know that's our Steam object, or our API object is what I've called it, because it might not be Steam. It could be anything. So then let's have a look at let's have a look at it in the editor. So this is what I've got set up. So this is like the main menu scene, and I've got this platform API controller object here. I could probably make that a prefab, but I haven't. And you can see it's got a bunch of components. And it's these components which are going to do the kind of business work here. So this first Steamworks controller, that's the one we were just looking at. That's just responsible for connecting to the Steam API using the FacePunch library. And then we've got these other services here, which are the service locators. So let's have a look at this achievement service here. So our Steam achievement, let's actually look at the, oh, I haven't got that, achievement service, there we go. So this is the achievement service on our behavior. You can see it's got one private iAchievement, which is an interface that I'll show you in a minute, called achievement implementation. So what this is our implementation of an achievement service. This class here doesn't know what type of implementation it is. That could be a Steam achievement service, it could be a PlayStation, it could be Nintendo, it could be nothing. Okay, we don't know, like this service locator doesn't need to know what this achievement implementation is pointing to. And that's kind of one of our goals here, is that if we're making a multi-platform game, we can very easily just switch this to a different platform and it'll all just work. So don't worry too much about this on enable stuff yet. But all we've got this one public, well, let's just look at this public method here, unlock achievement, which is the most common thing that you're going to want to do. Unlock achievement, it goes to achievement implementation, unlock achievement. And usually with achievement systems, you give some kind of string that is like an identifier for that achievement. So let's look at this interface that we've defined. So it's a very simple interface. So if you're not sure what an interface is, you basically are defining a set of methods that a class that implements this interface has to have. So in this case, we're saying that any achievement implementation must have a method that's unlock achievement that takes in a string that's the ID of that achievement. And then what we do is, if we want to make an achievement service for a particular platform, we need to actually write class for that. So this is the Steam achievement service that I've written. And you can see here, it's a mono behavior because I'm going to want to connect, I'm going to actually want to attach it to that game object I showed you earlier. And it implements the iAchievement interface, this interface here. So by implementing this, we need to ourselves write this unlock achievement method. And that's going to be different for each of your different platforms. So in the case of Steam, this is just, in a lot of ways, like this is how you do it with FacePunch, but depending on how you're using Steam within Unity, you have to write this to work in your own code. But basically, I check to see if the Steam client is valid. I create the achievement, and then I trigger the achievement. And that's it. Really simple class. And that is our kind of Steam achievement implementation. So then we have some in here. So now we can go back to our achievement service. And we've got this private iAchievement achievement implementation. We need to get that and actually assign that to something. And the way we do it is in the awake method, which is called, once this object is created, we use the getComponent method to find a component attached to this game object that implements iAchievement. And then we store a reference to that in our achievement implementation. And that's what we use to unlock achievements. Okay. Now, you might be a bit lost at this point. Don't worry too much. I'm going to show you another example to try and help you understand this. But let's have a look back in the editor. So you can see what we've got. We've got our Steamworks controller, which I showed you before. That's just looking at setting up Steamworks. We've got our achievement service, which is our achievement. That's this thing. And then we've added a Steam achievement service. The Steam achievement service is this thing. So what will happen is when we start the game, this method here, awake, will be called when this is created. It will search for the first iAchievement, the first component on this game object that implements that iAchievement interface that we defined. When it finds one, it will say, okay, this is my achievement service, or the thing that's implementing my achievements. I'm going to store it, and that's what I'm going to use to fire off achievements. I could easily create one of these for, say, a Nintendo achievement service, and then when I want to launch my game on Nintendo, I just have to remove this Steam achievement service and then add the Nintendo achievement service and not change anything else in my code. And that's what's so amazing about this pattern. Is that it decouples things and it really makes it easy for you to set this stuff up. So some of you might be thinking, okay, this is great, but how do we actually unlock an achievement from somewhere in our code? Well, then I'll show you an example here. So this is just some code somewhere. I don't even think this is a mono behavior. Yeah, this is just a normal C# class, which is to do with where we store all the story relevant data. The game has like a story mode and it has a challenge mode. So we kind of try and keep those a bit separate in our data. So in the story mode, we'll be unlocking lots of achievements and milestones. And what we actually do here, just to show you, is that within our game code, we have this concept of milestones. And those are things within the game, but those milestones all have achievements outside of the game. So the idea being that we have a save data where we're keeping track of the milestones a player has achieved, but that's slightly separate to the achievements. So that means like maybe if someone bought this on itch, don't have access to the Steam version, they can still see all their achievements. It means we don't rely on that external service. It also means, say Steam is down, we're still storing all these achievements that the player is doing, and the next time Steam is up, we can just unlock them, so that you don't lose progress. It's probably a good, that's a good practice to do, is to try and like keep things internal. I know it's very easy to just kind of rely on these APIs when you get access to them. I mean, they're really powerful, but try and have your own implementation as well, so you can do this sort of stuff. And so to get the achievement service, it's really easy. Like, so what I'm doing is I'm using the find object of type. And the reason I'm having to call it through Unity engine.object is because this class isn't a mono behavior. So I need to call this static method. I'm finding an achievement service, which if you remember is this thing. So I'm finding that achievement service, getting it. I'm checking to see if it's there. So I'm doing if achievement service. Now, something that's quite nice with Unity is that anything that is inheriting from mono behavior, you can actually check if you can just write if and achievement service, and if that exists, that will be true. So we can say if that achievement service exists, then we get that component, because this is a game of, well, I don't need to do this get component actually. I've just realized I can just do straight and just do this because I've already got the achievement service here. I'm not going to change that now. Not while I'm live in a video, but I don't need to do that because I got the achievement service as an achievement service, so I've saved myself a step. And that's how those achievements work. So that's the flow, is I get this, so that where in my code here, I'm finding an achievement service and I'm calling the method unlock achievement. That is being called here. And then in this class, this is the class that's responsible for keeping track of what particular implementation of achievements I'm using. Am I on PlayStation? Am I on Steam? Am I not using one at all? It calls that implementation. In this case, it's a Steam implementation. In this class, this class is taking responsibility of making sure that the Steam client is valid. So in the case that someone doesn't have Steam installed or Steam is down, this won't create an error. It won't crash the game. It checks, and if Steam is there, it triggers it. So that's the flow. There's quite a lot of pieces going on, but it's a really nice pattern. Once you really get used to it, you end up starting to want to use it anywhere. So just to kind of make sure that you've kind of followed this, I'm going to show you somewhere else that I use the pattern, which is with the stats. So you've got Steam achievements are just like achievements you unlock, and then you also have Steam stats. And Steam stats like track things like number of kills, number of miles traveled and stuff. Works in a similar kind of way, very much related to the achievement system. So if you see, so let's go back to our kind of this nice object here that's got all our API stuff on it. So we've got this stat service here. So let's have a look at the stat service. That has an iStat implement. So it's the implementation of the stat service implements this interface iStat. Let's have a look at that. So you can see there's a bit more going on here, because there's more to do. Unlocking achievements is just like unlock the achievement. There's not much else. You could also maybe check to see if they've already unlocked it, but we didn't have a use for that. So here we can do things like so setting stats. Stats can be integers or floats. So I've got this method. There's two ways. It's got two. We're overloading that method. We're using overloading to depending on whether the value is an int or a float, it'll call the correct method. Add stat, what that does is this actually sets the stat. Add stat is you get the stat of that ID and you add this value to it. So this is usually for stats that like count how many games you've played and stuff like that. And also now we've got some get the stats. So we're actually going to get the stat from the server if we want to do it. And then there's a function for save the stats, because with the stats it doesn't save it every time you set one. You need to like set them all and call a save stats method, otherwise it won't save them. Usually it does that when the application closes, but maybe you lose internet connection or something. You want to save these stats when it makes sense too. And then a function that's kind of just to check that if that service exists. So we'll look at then the Steam stat service, which is the Steam implementation. And you can see I've implemented it. There's probably like some, this is, I'm kind of showing you my actual code here. So like with many things, I'm sure there's better ways of me writing this. Like, feel free to let me know. But this is just how it is written at the moment. So I want to kind of show you real stuff, like not just kind of these academic examples. I think it's good for you to see a bit of both. So the implementation, I mean, it's pretty simple. I'm using, in a lot of ways, these kind of these interfaces. Most of these functions, I just looked at what the methods were in this library for the stat service. So like I went through all the Steam stat stuff and I wrote a method for each one of those because we're probably going to need to use them. And so it's a lot of just kind of what we call forwarding methods. We're just forwarding that to the Steam service. So they're all here. The only kind of slightly different one is like I've included a has service here to return if this service exists. I probably didn't need to do that there. Like, I guess this actually makes sense because maybe some platforms don't have a stats service. So you probably want to know that. So you probably want in your code to check to see if stats are even a thing for the platform you're on. Okay, so that's the Steam implementation of this. And then the stat service, pretty much the same as the other one. It wakes up, it looks on the game object and it finds a component that implements this interface and then stores that. So we could switch, this, for as far as this class is concerned, it doesn't know anything about what platform, what API this is connected to, or even if there's one exists. It doesn't care. It just has grabbed an implementation and it's going to pass on messages to it, basically. Don't worry too much about these. I'll explain those in a minute. But then these are kind of more project specific functions for me. So I've got some on the stat service. I've put a lot of the kind of actual calculating the stats here. So because I figured that this stat service should be responsible for everything. And then what I've done is these, what I've got here, these are events that I've got set on a bunch of my classes. And these are events, we'll do another video on events, but events kind of get fired. These events get fired at certain points during the game. And I'm subscribing to these events here. So for example, like I'm subscribing to an easy one so challenge mode, right? So we've got this challenge mode, and so I've got an event on the challenge mode class, which is a static event. So it doesn't matter. I only need to subscribe to it once because it's a static event, and then that is called from whenever that class is used and instantiated on new entry. So this is when the player submits a new entry to the leaderboard, and so that's fired, and I've subscribed to that event here in my stat service, and this method will be called. So if you look, this takes in basically what I'm doing here is I'm keeping track. The challenges are there's a monthly, a daily, and a weekly leaderboard that you can submit a score to, and I want to keep track of how many times you've done that. And so it takes in, okay, which is it? What's the frequency of this particular challenge you submitted? And then first I check to see if there is a stat implementation. There isn't, it returns. Otherwise, I add a stat based on this frequency, and then save them to make sure they're saved. So, and then the final one, this one's like way more complicated because it's leaderboards. And so I do also have a leaderboard. I've done a similar thing with leaderboards, or maybe I didn't actually. I haven't used that pattern with leaderboards yet. So I need to go back in and refactor that because I hadn't learned about that pattern before I implemented leaderboards. So yeah, if you struggle to follow that, like watch through it again. I think with these things, I don't want to like hand out code for this stuff because it's more important you understand the aims of these patterns rather than actually like copying and paste my implementation. It's about trying to figure out ways of structuring your code so you have as little coupling as possible. So like our aim, there was kind of like two aims here. One aim was for me to be able to just submit a stat or unlock an achievement anywhere in my code without adding in any coupling. And the other thing that we did as well is we didn't have any coupling on the game talking to the service end, and then we didn't have any coupling on the service talking to the API end, because I can make in like with 0 lines of code, right? I don't need to, once you've implemented your service, your specific API service for each of these interfaces, you don't have to change a single line of code to change this between using Steam and using like Nintendo or something. So yeah, so this is a pretty complicated one. But ask any questions. I highly recommend like reading up on this stuff. Service Locator pattern is really useful. Like everything, I mean, it's all about kind of knowing what tools are out there and kind of trying to understand it when you then come to implement this stuff yourself. Like I said, like I didn't use it for the leaderboard controller because I wrote the leaderboard controller such a long time ago. I didn't know about this pattern, and it's something I've only learned, in the last maybe like 5 months or so. And so we're always learning, and this is what this is about. Is hopefully I've triggered something in your mind to kind of like think and look into this a bit more. Have another look through the video. If you didn't quite follow it, go through step by step, pause it, have a look at the code. And if you have any questions, just ask. Thanks for watching.